We're here with Thomas Fehlmann at the RX Gallery. Fehlmann has just released an album called Low Flow on Plug Research, and we're here to ask Mr. Fehlmann some questions. How would you describe your new album, Low Flow, in a nutshell?
Basically, it's the stuff I left out the last 4 years, because this music has been in my head all the time. And before I worked for the compact label, my albums are covering like the whole techno bit, to low, to ambient, to everything. And then for some reason I thought, I wanted to check like one thing really to the depth. Like with the compact stuff, I really wanted to go for the dance floor, and made me kind of explore it far deeper than before, whereas I want to do a little bit of that. With Low Flow, I wanted just to fill this gap of me like leaving the down tempo side out of my kind of open work for a while, and concentrate like to work for a full album of it. And basically, the music is as dear to me as the other stuff, but I realize it has a different kind of angle of going to the people, and maybe even different people will like it instead of the compact stuff. So I really wanted to give the full picture of what I'm about.
What could you say would be your influence for this new album? Definitely sounds different than Visions of Blah. What would you say? I mean, it sounds almost like it even has a hip-hop feel to some of the beats that you used in the new album, Low Flow.
Yeah. You're correct. I mean, this just represents like my other kind of love for the music, because I feel myself, I'm more like, I'm taking all this stuff in, from various sources, buying records, going to gigs, and watching all this stuff. And this is just the way I digest.
Definitely.
Musically speaking, So this is the way.
I don't mind.
Hip hop had a big influence, but by hip hop I mean more kind of an abstract instrumental feel to it. As my my native tongue is German, and my ears are very much. I'm a musical kind of guy in terms that I'm not so much thinking about lyrics or text or anything. So I was very welcomed, like when Dabri released his records on Ghostly and on other labels. That's something which I thought was really strong kind of statement, and just assured me I should not forget about my love of that music. He kind of woke me up in that sense.
I can hear a lot of different genres, I could say, in your music, from jazz to hip-hop to ambient.
Like jazz is all, that's kind of the music I listened to when I was a kid. After my first kind of pop music developments when I was kind of 13, 14, I started to get into jazz, and that hasn't left me since. And because I'm not a musician who kind of entertains you on the piano, and I'm not the guy who is the muso in terms of the master of an instrument, I work with it like this, that I take some samples in, and there's even kind of a couple of trumpet bits which I played myself.
I also wanted to ask you about your transition. It seems like from every label you've worked on, R&S Records to Compact to now to Plug Research, each moment in time that you recorded these albums, they definitely have a different sound too.
I think this has more to do with the time. As time goes on, I try to, get more clear. Also, maybe just mature. Hopefully, by doing it over and over. And like the R&S records reflected more like me doing everything. That has more down tempo stuff, more up tempo stuff. It has more the whole picture, and as I said, I wanted to split it up more because I felt I could go more into the tracks and bring more out of it, and force me to bring more ideas into that.
Out of yourself.
Yeah.
Test yourself.
Exactly. And I like to take risks because it gets boring otherwise.
Every album from you has been different. I can hear, a lot of different influences in your music, and that's what one of my next questions is who are some of your influences, past and present?
There's two ways of looking at this term influence, because I'm very much influenced by a certain attitude a musician has. Let's pick Miles Davis, for example. He was like evolving and changing and almost like putting on a new kind of clothes. Like for so many parts in his career, he kind of came up with a cool jazz, came up with
more abstract jazz,
and then got into electric side. And by 69 and 70, when he made Bitches Brew, this is kind of a very crucial part of my youth, whereas I really connected with something which I never experienced before. And I had the chance of seeing him in '73
Wow.
in Switzerland, where I
Montreux, was that?
Montreux, exactly. And that had never left me, because I felt that was such an intense moment where these guys played together, sometimes not even really knowing what by the end result will be like, because they were really experimenting themselves and exposed themselves to, we can fuck up. And not everybody loved it, but I certainly did. And I would consider that to be a very strong influence on me. But not so much that I tried to copy the music, but I tried to copy this, or not trying to copy it, but I was inspired by this radical kind of
Concepts.
and this radical kind of incorporation of this new instrumentation he felt
Definitely.
at that time. So.
And also it was a lot of studio work had an effect on the music and the editing. And
true that the actual playing on stage was part of it, or the playing in the studio was part of it, but then it got into another stage of being processed and being edited and all this kind of stuff, which I just saw brought a new level into the way I looked at music before. But Brian Eno, on the other hand, is also a guy who's influenced me very strongly, because he was the guy for me who championed the idea of that you don't have to be a master musician on a certain instrument that you be able to make good music, but it's more like the concept and the attitude the way you
approach it.
Yeah, you approach it, you cut it up, you put it together in your own style, in your own way.
There doesn't have to be a formula.
Exactly. So, and also this freedom, he made some disco things, he made some ambient things, as you know, he made even pop songs. I'm not trying to sort of copy what he did, but what I'm inspired by is his freedom of going wherever he liked to go. He needs to take his personal style, his personal way of choosing chords, of choosing whatever sounds, and this made me kind of look different, at being a musician. So those are two of very crucial influences which have kind of
that's very interesting.
Come along with me all my life in a way, since I'm consciously listening to music, kind of thing.
Which Brian Eno album would you say would be your favorite, if you had to name one? Either a produced album, maybe like Heroes or Low, or one of his solo albums.
The second side of Low, I really love that, the way they go instrumental and where they have the short pieces, which you don't really notice when one is finished and the other one starts. Kind of, they have a great flow.
They flow from each other, yeah.
Bowie's Low second side is a very, very strong record. But I like Another Green World, or Before and After. Another Green World, maybe out of his pop song records, is my favorite. And then the Apollo record on the ambient side is very strong.
Classic ambient albums.
With him, for a certain time, each record was very strong.
He was also influenced by jazz. I heard he named a track after Joe Zawinul, and it's an ambient track.
See, in Joe Zawinul, obviously, me coming a bit from the keyboard side, I think he's a great inspiration too. Because also when he plays synthesizer, he doesn't just play piano lines on a synthesizer, but he plays like the totally different way. And most of like jazz rock synthesizer players, they just play this kind of normal kind of Hammond organ or piano licks on there, and it just doesn't sound as interesting to me. And Zawinul really explored a way of using a synthesizer as a new instrument, and not just another keyboard where you play the same licks.
He wrote In a Silent Way, right, for Miles Davis, which is a classic track.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great to hear about your influences. It's amazing how you can hear some of those things if you listen closely to Thomas Fehlmann records. Right. What was the circumstances surrounding your introduction to electronic music? I heard you were a big fan of Robert Fripp in your early years.
Robert Fripp was for me important when he was with King Crimson, and then obviously big kind of lightening up for me was when he were teamed up with Brian Eno for the first time for No Pussyfooting. And what I really liked with him is that he abandoned his superstardom to come back onto the road, play in record shops for free for the people there, just to introduce his kind of
new sound,
excellent sound. He just kind of discovered it, worked on with Fripp, and he influenced Fripp as well, in the way he kind of treated his guitar playing, not being the super guitarero, the purpose, like trying to bring the whole thing together, not showing off.
And you actually got a chance to work with Robert Fripp on the FFWD album.
That's right. So since I met him in '79 for the first time, and then we kept in touch loosely. And for some reason, after meeting him, that was for me the moment where I figured I was in art school at that time, and I figured I think I should try something with music too. And that took up quite quickly. And that my first band started, Palais Schaumburg.
Yes.
There I was.
Wow.
The art school more and more became unimportant, and that's sort of I didn't really consciously think, okay, this is analog or acoustic music and this is electronic music. For me, that was continuous flow. Just whilst I was in the middle of the electronic side, I discovered, oh right, something's changed. But I started with the synthesizer, so for me that was basically my introduction to it. To not only hear it on record, but actually twiddle them up myself.
Definitely.
Which, you suddenly also realize, oh, it's not that easy as you might think when you listen to records and all that.
Wow, that's amazing. Who else would you say that influenced you from the German scene, like Tangerine Dream or Klaus Schulze?
There is one band which I think is very strong, another link to Brian Eno, which is called Cluster. Cluster is my favorite band of that time, and they're really amazing.
With Rodelius and
Möbius, those two guys made a series of records which I think are just very strong. Appreciate they're very much kind of, for a certain selected audience only, because they're not their commercial kind of, middle of the road hit they can have to transmit something. I like that. And that, in a way, I feel also, since I see these guys aging in a proper kind of way without having to selling out. In a way, I see myself as a musician, because I don't try to be, as MTV compatible as possible, but more trying to sort of stay true to my ideas and my ideals as well. And my ideals is just don't fucking, give it up.
I have another question here about the collapse of the EFA. Talking about records and the way music is produced and released these days. How has that affected music, especially in Germany? A distribution company like EFA being so huge. Have you noticed that? Any kind of a change in?
I noticed it just that people had bigger headaches. But I didn't notice it in the quality of music. And then maybe you notice it in the terms that for a certain while records weren't distributed as well as they were for a certain time. So you had maybe a lack of communication with other countries for a while, but that was only brief. And in case of Compact, they were independent anyway from EFA. That really cut them so much.
So, but the best music today is still found in the underground, right? And these smaller labels,
as far as I'm concerned, I agree.
Labels like Compact and Plug Research are really pushing the envelope. Who else? Are there any other particular labels or countries, or you would say, is really making the best music right now? I know the Japanese are making some very interesting electronic music and ambient music. People like Ryuichi Sakamoto and.
Funny you should mention him, because I followed his work also from very early days onwards. And that was in December. I was in Japan, and I was introduced to Haruomi Hosono, one of the gentlemen from Yellow Magic.
A great ambient composer in his own right.
I don't really want to. I think it has certain phases, like certain countries are me. I have a strong kind of development phase, and then they kind of mellow out. For example, at the moment I don't find so many interesting things in England, but I find many interesting things in Germany, which is something we're kind of very surprised by, because I'm working in music since 20 years, and when I started out it was still unthinkable that the German music would be worldwide respected on such a scale as it is now. You had the Tangerine Dreams and the Klaus Schulzes, which were respected, and Can
Holger Suke,
strong team and very influential in their radical kind of I don't care basically attitude, which
Definitely.
I find
it's a very German sound to Tangerine Dream and Conrad Schnitzler and Can. You know, they have a very particular sound.
Yeah. But I like this playfulness of Cluster a lot.
Definitely.
You know, they are almost they wouldn't be afraid to go close to a kiddie song or something. I really like that kind of.
Some of their tracks are very melodic too.
Simplicity of it and the directness of it, I really enjoyed, and they had much stronger impact on me than Tangerine Dream. For example, I wasn't into drugs at that time. When I was a kid, I didn't even know about it too much, and for some reason, you know, Cluster really spoke to me.
What about music like psychedelic music from the 60s or 70s? Was that an influence on you at all?
Yeah, sure. King Crimson and this project from New York, Golden Apples, very strong. Can, obviously,
Can.
you know, again. I listened to Pink Floyd as well, I have to admit. But it happens, you know, they had their great phase, you know, up until, let's say, Echoes, maybe. That was the record where I was thinking,
Yeah.
maybe it's not so interesting anymore, but, you know.
They definitely had a great period in the 60s and 70s.
But, you know, when I was a kid, obviously, I wasn't so super closely focused on how careers develop, you know. I was just learning and see how these things are, you know.
So it must have been a dream come true for you to actually meet Robert Fripp the first time for you.
Totally, yeah. And I asked him whether he would come down to play at my art school, at his academy, and he said, sure. And so, you know, I made up a poster. That was the first concert I kind of promoted. I made some flyers, brought them out, you know.
Wow.
On telephone, kind of.
Balls, yeah.
Yeah, all that. So he came down, played a wonderful set, and, you know.
And he just played by himself on a guitar?
Yeah, with, you know, this Frippertronics things, you
He
know.
had the
it's
whole
just-
Frippertronics?
Yeah, you know, 2 tape machines.
Wow.
Which are kind of linked together.
Uh-huh.
And then this echo situation starts up, and he was doing that just by himself for 1.5 hours.
That's amazing. That must have been something to see. And now, how would you explain your collaboration with The Orb? You've been working with them for quite a long time now. Starting with, was it Orbis Terram or Pomfrits?
No,
Actually, for the first album?
No, even on the first album. The track I worked on the first album was Outlands.
Oh, okay.
And on the second one, it was Towers of Dub. And, you know, so I'm totally there.
You've been there.
Not in the same extent as later on. Let's say with Pomfrits and with Orbis, I worked them all the way through the album. And the next one we're doing, I'm going to do all the way again as well. Like the Bicycles and Tricycles, I'm only involved in about 4 or 5 tracks. 5 tracks, I think. So, you know, what I like about this situation with the Orb, that it's not that I'm contractually bound.
Obligated.
I can do whatever, whenever I want. And with Alex, it's just he lets me do what I want, and I'm so happy about his input as well. So we write songs together, and in the beginning we had an engineer working with us, finishing it up. But these days we do it ourselves. So this is what I find the joy. We're so it's totally independent from anything, and especially now, like being not contractually bound to Island or some big company anymore. It's even freer, and that is a joy.
Since The Orb has moved to compact, there's a new sound to The Orb.
At first, I mean, we were just enjoying this radical freedom of doing whatever we can do. But I think as an album, we want to, you know, obviously, you know, stay true to our philosophy and make it a proper Orb album, even though it might, you know, have a couple of steps forward from the last.
Definitely. There's a new single I heard out from The Orb on compact called Complot. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I definitely heard some singing in the rain in one of the tracks there.
Yeah, that's true. That's part of the joy, you know. We can do whatever we want to do. That's so fun.
It's a beautiful dance track.
That's the thing, you know. I mean, I can't really explain too much about it in terms of what we aimed at. Hello. And we didn't make a conscious decision of, you know, we do this or we do that. That's never really how it worked with the Orb. With the Orb, it's just, you know, plug it in and see what happens.
And do you usually record together in the same room with Patterson?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing, you know, that's the trademark of the Orb. Alex is there. And and if Alex is not there, I won't be able to sound the same. He has this kind of magic input, which makes you do different things you normally wouldn't do. That's also part of a good inspiration, you know. And Alex, I have to say, maybe is also a big inspiration in the sense that he really assured me of believing of what I like and believing of what I do, and not trying to kind of, you know, make it sounding more like this or make it sounding more like that. He just always kind of supported me in saying, yes, that's what you do. That's believe in that, you know. So he gave me loads of self-confidence, and obviously with Orb now having a big history as well in their own right, I'm very pleased to see that this freedom he allowed me to have had such an impact, you know.
And you're a big part of that new sound. You can definitely hear your influence on the Orb, and the, you know.
At least with certain tracks I have.
Definitely.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
What kind of equipment or software do you use for your compositions, if you'd like to talk about that?
Yeah, since day one I'm using Logic.
Logic.
Yeah. Even when it was on Atari, I started out sequencing with the Atari, just MIDI-wise, and it was always, first it was called, what was it called? I can't even remember now. Anyway, the Logic kind of history, that was always the sequencer of my joys. And since then you know kind of ins and outs, the way to know how they program, I don't need anything else. And for the live stuff, that's a new step for me. I use this live software. It's called Live from Ableton.
Live, Ableton, right?
And the guy who designed it, Robert Henke, the Monolake man, he's a kind of good friend, musician friend of mine from Berlin. And he always said, you know, one day I'm going to do the musician's sequencer, because I have this idea of how we always wanted to be like.
Definitely.
And he did it, and it works.
Wow.
Yeah, you know, really.
And this is how you recorded your new album, Low Flow?
No, like when I make the tracks, it's always with Logic.
Okay.
And after I finish the track, I kind
edit it,
bring it onto the level of being able to work on the live software. Yeah.
And on this tour,
Logic is always the mother.
The brain of your music. Yeah. Are you going to be performing live on this tour here in the United States, or DJ set?
No,
You're performing all live and on all your dates.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're really looking forward to that here.
Cheers.
And this is your first album with Plug Research, right? Low Flow?
This is my first album with Plug Research, and this is the first night I'm going to play it live.
And we're really looking forward to that here. We're at the RX Gallery. There's one track on your new album called Interstellar.
Yeah.
And I read somewhere that this was influenced by Alice Coltrane.
You're right. That was right. That was the right quote. You know, what I like about her is her kind of, how should I... She has this kind of spiritual element to it.
Definitely.
Which I might not totally sympathize in the way that I would like to join a group of, you know, Indian Buddhists or anything. Not in that sense. But I just felt a strong presence and a strong kind of additional element through her spirituality. And therefore I kind of
gravitated towards that music.
That's right, yeah.
Yes, I'm a big fan of Alice Coltrane also.
Did you hear her new record?
I haven't heard it. How is it?
It's amazing. I mean, it's not the whole album, as you know, all the tracks are great, but maybe half of it is absolutely wonderful.
Wow. And is she playing the harp on that, or?
No, she doesn't touch the harp.
Oh, really?
She plays organ though.
Oh, wow.
Which I think is, she has this unique sound. Only Alice Coltrane sounds like.
Amazing, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I haven't heard the new album, but she's a big inspiration to me. And I actually visited the church of John Coltrane, which was here in San Francisco not too long ago.
Oh, wow.
That was really cool.
Wow. Yeah, Coltrane obviously was also a musician I listened to a lot when I was younger, and still am. You know, I bought all his records on CD again. You know, I really have to.
Wow.
I like to be surrounded by this kind of sound. When I'm at home, that at least half of the music I listen to is jazz. And only the other half is electronics. It's not that I'm a sort of 100 pro. I take it in from various things, and music of choice for me to listen at home is very much jazz.
And what about techno? Like I know Detroit techno was also an influence on you. Is there any current music in techno that you would say is really forward-looking or.
You know the main man from Compact. His name is Wolfgang Vogt.
Yes.
He is a very strong techno musician because he has more elements to it than the bang. You know, the banging groove. And if I hear and feel something which is more than just the groove, the banging groove, then basically I'm in. And Detroit for me has the same element because there was also a strong emotional and spiritual element to it. And with them it's also a strong sense of experimenting and working with very little. You don't have to have a huge studio to make good music. And that's something which I thought was very inspirational with them, you know. Just 2-3 machines and the ideas, that's the main thing. What's in your head?
Definitely. And do you think their environment, the Detroit landscape,
has a strong influence
on the music?
Not only on the music, but also on their dedication that they keep with the music, because they know if they go to the street and hang out too much, they run into trouble. So it's basically their way out of this dark kind of corner of the world, you know.
As well as Germany too, I think their music definitely has their post-war music, especially, you know, is definitely very dark and definitely has a certain sound, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Wow. And you know, like with Darbury, he's coming out of Detroit too, and I think he's in a way a very good continuation of what I love about the Detroit sound. Or Theo Parrish, Moody Man, you know. Theo Parrish, I think, is also fabulous. But at the same time, I like Madlib on Stone's Throw as well, you know, because he's also a guy who brings in many things I like from the past, you know, like jazz, you know, some Caribbean stuff, you know. I love that.
Wow, that's interesting. What is your association with Ocean Club? I'm a big fan of the Ocean Club series and the compilations.
This girl who just came to me, my girlfriend Gudrun.
Yes, who you're doing this tour with, right?
My partner in the Ocean Club. That's the two of us who do it.
Wow.
And we do a radio show every week. You could actually hear it here if you like. It's on the net.
Wow.
All 350 editions are on the net to listen to for you. We checked it out today. It works.
There's some great selections on the compilations. And who are some of your favorite tracks from the Ocean Club series? I heard what's his name from Brazil, the American Brazilian guy on your first compact, Ardo Lindsay.
Yeah.
It's an awesome track.
I really love Ardo Lindsay. But the thing is, when we start our radio show, we always say we play our favorite music. So it's not that I can't really tell you what a favorite would be because they're all
your favorites.
Yeah.
Do you have any planned compilations coming out from that series, the Ocean Club?
You know what? They didn't sell as well as we expected.
Really?
And we didn't really find a partner to have a continuity with. So we rather felt, keep it quiet for a bit. The time will come. Because the music won't go away, and especially because we're allowed to, because the Ocean Club concept also consists of old tracks as well as new tracks. You can always do that again.
Well, personally, I hope you keep releasing those compilations because there's some amazing tracks on there. What are you working on right now?
New Orb album.
The New Orb album. And when do you expect that to be out? It's going to be out on the Compact label?
Yeah. It's going to be out later in the year. By later in the year, I mean October-ish, not November-ish. Because that'll take some time, we don't want to rush it. And we have loads of material already, but we know we need to digest stuff, shift it around, I hope that we can deliver it by summer. And that it might even, I hope it'll be out this year. But with record companies, they always take longer than you wish. But it's good because they know what they're doing. I mean, Compact was so supportive to us. We have to trust in their policy, and because the label's so small, we know each person.
Definitely.
There's no fucking about.
Any chances of another FFWD album or an ambient album in that vein?
There is a chance. First of all, the original FFWD album will be re-released this year.
Wow, that's good news because that's out of print right now.
And it's going to be re-released on Robert's label.
Wow.
And that means we're going to be more in contact together. And you never know what will happen.
Well, I hope so. We'll be looking forward to that one. I have one last question for you, Thomas. What happens in a typical day in the life of Thomas Fehlmann?
Getting
This is
up
from
in
a
the
fan's
morning,
question.
having a cup of tea and reading 3 papers. And by 1 o'clock I'm in the studio. And at the moment I kind of organize my life that I'd be able to make music every day. So doing the mails before 1 and doing the mails, I never switch off the studio until I go to bed, which is like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And then I just go back into the studio, do a bit of mailing for an hour, go back and think about the sound, go back. It's basically always on. And then, on the weekends we do the radio show. That's the 2 of us locked in the studio together and listening to the new records and making our kind of choices, Pretty boring, isn't it?
Yeah, no, not really. I'd like to thank Thomas Fehlmann very much for interviewing with us today. He has a new album out on Plug Research called Low Flow. Go out and get it. It's an amazing album, and he's an amazing guy. Thanks again, Thomas Fehlmann.